Okay, good morning all. Thanks for attending our webinar, the first in a series of 3 throughout the month of May. Super excited to have you with us. My name is Tim Christian. I am Vice President and Director of Digital Services over at KW2. We are in Madison, Wisconsin, and got a number of participants today that are joining us from B2B places throughout the Midwest. So this is a webinar series that's in concert with a strategic partner of ours, Earthling Interactive. They're a programming firm here in Madison. KW2 is a B2B digital marketing agency. There's a smattering of the logos of the folks that we work with here, but it's a specialty of ours, and we're excited to bring you some of our learnings, and hope you guys can take what we're presenting over the course of the next 3 webinars and apply it at your own business, because we think it has a ton of value, analytics and the data you can learn from. So today you'll be hearing from myself, I'm Tim, and then there is Allison Trapp and Claire Lemke. They're both UX designers at KW2. And then Tom Kuplik, he's the VP of Business Services over at Earthling Interactive. So that's who you'll be hearing from over the course of the next hour. We think we'll probably go until about 11:50. We generally don't go the full hour with these unless there's a ton of questions at the end. But definitely, you know the drill on webinars. You can post your questions whenever they come to you, and we'll be monitoring the panel to see if those come in throughout the presentation. So don't hesitate to add questions there. All right, so just an overview of our series that you signed up for, either one or all 3 of these, but throughout the month of May. The first one is creating a strategic website measurement plan. That's what we're doing today. The one on May 15th is simplifying goal and event creation using Tag Manager. That's a Google product. Maybe you guys are using that already, but we'll help break down some of the barriers of adopting Tag Manager to help you as a marketer track your events on your website easier. And then finally on May 30th, it'll be all about calculating ROI. And all of this is wrapped within using Google Analytics to help you with all these things. So that's an overview of the series. If you only signed up for one, you can definitely still sign up for the other 2 if you want to, up to the day of the webinar. So the links are on our website from the email you originally received. So, all right, so let's get rolling. From a survey, this was done in 2016, of over 2,000 marketers across the country, 85% of those folks who are in marketing or communications positions said they feel more and more pressure to show ROI, right? I'm sure it's not a shock to you that there are folks above you that are always wondering, what is marketing even getting me? What do my advertising dollars get me? What is my website content investments? What's it getting me? So a lot of pressure out there. And yet, 40% of those same people couldn't actually show how marketing was impacting the organizational or business goals. So that's a shocking number, that 40% of folks just couldn't actually show ROI. And so that's one of the reasons we kind of came up with this series, is this observation and this insight into, we all got a lot of pressure to show ROI, and yet we don't know how to. Well, analytics is a key to making that happen for you. So the first question you might ask, because today's topic is about establishing a measurement plan. Why should you create a measurement plan? Because this is taking a step way up strategically to make sure you understand what your website is really doing for your business. If you just jump into Google Analytics without any measurement plan in place, you'll be shocked how often you'll open up your dashboard, stare at it for a couple of minutes, and not know anything about what those numbers are telling you to do. A measurement plan helps add intelligence to your analytics data, and we're going to walk you through it. But why should you create one? Quite frankly, if you can't measure it, you can't improve. Like, we're all trying to improve whatever we're doing in our marketing efforts, and this is a lesson for life too, right? But in business, for marketing, if you can't measure it, you can't improve upon it. And so this is the first kind of stake in the ground to say, all right, we're going to measure A, B, and C, and then we're going to start learning from analytics if we're actually achieving any of those things we set out to achieve. So it's all about improvement on the tactics. So for instance, which inbound channels are performing the best? What's the ROI of my online and offline marketing efforts? These are, pretty common questions I would think you would ask yourself, right? Who are my users and what leads them to convert? That's a key, obviously. And then what areas of opportunity exist on my site? So this is just an example of the type of things that a measurement plan will get set up to help answer these questions. So let's now take another question. Why do we use analytics? And I've written a statement here that it makes common sense, I think. We use analytics to gain insights by looking at user behavior, compare it to what important actions you think should be happening in an ideal user experience, right? So I think that's a pretty common sense sentence of why the heck we would use analytics in the first place. But I would encourage us also to look at that as a flipped sentence. So now you may notice that I took the last phrase, define the ideal user experience on your website, to help you understand what the important actions are so that analytics can help lead you to insights. It's kind of a minor tweak of a sentence, but it has a great impact on how you'd actually approach looking at the numbers in your analytics. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is that first sentence of defining the ideal user experience on your website and understanding what your website should actually be doing for that user, and in turn for your business. So that's like a setup to the whole thing today, like the importance of setting up a measurement plan. Now we're going to start digging into some more of the details. I'm going to turn it over to Tom Kuplik. As I said, he's with Earthling Interactive. They're a programming shop here in Madison, and they do just fantastic work for us, and we're proud to have them along on this webinar. So Tom, take it away.
Thanks, Tim. This, as Tim said, this is Tom Kuplik. We're at Earthling Interactive. We help companies kind of really seize hold of their website and think about themselves now in this, I think, digital frontier as to how to make the most effective use out of all the digital tools that they have. And when you're talking about analytics, I think one of the ways to frame the discussion and understanding is to think about conversions. And there's, all conversions are not equal. So the best way to think about a breakdown, a simple breakdown to the types of conversions one sees on a website are to bucket these things into macro and micro conversions. And macro conversions tend to be big things that your organization is trying to achieve. So in a B2B sense, this could be, say you don't sell direct to consumer, but you have a sales group and they have quote requests that they're submitting for a particular product or something like that. You would consider that to be a macro conversion. You might also have downloads of different types of reports that you're offering people. You might have events that people are registering for. You can have outreach that happens directly on your website, like a support request. Those would be those large organizational goals that you're trying to achieve in terms of really easy things to sort of understand as having big value to the company. A micro conversion is something that maybe is a little bit smaller. It's something that maybe precedes a macro conversion. So people might be reading information on your website. They might be looking at maybe a support document before they actually reach out to support. All kinds of behavior that you can look at on the site that precede a larger conversion, but maybe be thought of as a nudge or directionally kind of bringing somebody towards an actual conversion. So these are the examples of the online, online purchase, service sign up, lead format, lead submission. Any one of those types of actions on the macro level are really tied to what your organizational goals are. On the micro level, they're a little bit smaller events. And when we get to the second webinar, we're really going to be talking a lot about how to sort of actually operationalize these large big picture macro goals and these micro goals in terms of implementing it into a measurement system on your website. But for the time being, these are the big buckets that we like to think about things in terms of how people are actually going to be converting on your website. I'm going to throw it over to Claire, I think, right, to start, and she's going to be talking a little bit about a measurement plan framework, which is how you kind of move forward from those macro micro conversions into some other measurements.
Yeah, great. So yes, this is Claire. We just covered why it is so important for B2B companies to have insights drive your measurement. So now we're going to walk through a framework to help you develop an actionable measurement plan for your organization. And Allison and I are going to be kind of trading back and forth between the different steps of this framework. So I know that some of you today are from financial institutions and some are from really large scale B2B operations, and a few of you are from smaller companies. So our two examples today offer some variety with the hope that one of those two examples is going to resonate with the challenges and goals that your business has. But of course, if you have specific questions about a challenge that you're facing with something that you want to be able to measure, definitely, throw the question in throughout this webinar. We'll make sure to get to those at the end. Otherwise, you can always reach out to us too with your specific questions and needs. So measurement for B2B is fundamentally different than for companies that have, lower cost products or a one-time purchase from B2B. So things like e-commerce or direct-to-consumer products, right? So the challenges that you face and the things that you're measuring are very, very different from those kinds of environments. In B2B, while the service that you're selling might not be very easy to measure, you're still selling things that are tangible at the end of the day. And the on-site actions that lead to that big sale aren't going to be easy to measure necessarily. So usually your end goal is going to be to communicate the value of something that's not very tangible, like reliability, for example, that you're going to be able to complete a big job on time and on budget. Those are difficult things to measure how well you're communicating them. And then backing up claims with examples of your team's experience is another thing that you'll need to do on your site, but it's really difficult to measure kind of the ROI on examples of your team's experience. But even though that can be the case, there are still actions that users can take on your website that have measurable value to your organization, and that's really what we want to focus on today. Okay, so a measurement plan is the translation of your organization's objectives, the ones that impact your bottom line, into concrete metrics that can be measured from actions taken on your website. So it requires foresight to set up the right kind of tracking, it requires having the right content, and you also need the ability for your users to do the right actions. So we know that your sales team does a lot of heavy lifting once a lead gets in the door. But when we help B2B clients add value to their website analytics, we often ask them, what does your website need to do for your business before that potential customer ever interacts with the sales team? And that's a really big question. So here's this 4-step framework that's up on the screen that helps to answer that question and what we really mean by that. So the 4 steps are up here. Determining organizational objectives is step number 1, and it absolutely has to come before everything else. The second step is to translate those objectives that the organization has into website goals that can actually be accomplished through the web and through your digital properties. The third one is to find your KPIs or key performance indicators and to set targets and benchmarks and measure those over time. And then finally, to identify valuable audience segments. So I'm going to cover the first step with examples, and then I'll hand things over to Allison after that. So step 1, what are your business objectives? Depending on your business type and the structure of your organization, you might have multiple measurable objectives. And some examples of those might be to build or increase your portfolio, leveraging your existing relationships. Or it might be to generate high value or longer term relationships by using a different marketing or sales strategy than in the past. Depending on how many audiences you have, you might have quite a few of these objectives, but the key question to ask yourself and to ask your stakeholders is, why do we exist? And that's a core question. It's fundamental for every business, but that's a really complex and complicated question to try and answer. So we've broken it into, some smaller ways to kind of get at that. To answer the question fully, you're going to first have to identify that who box for who needs to be involved in order to make that decision. So that could include, leadership, your operations team, subject matter experts are definitely going to be someone to tap on the shoulder for this. And then you'll also want to involve, your marketing team, your sales team, if you have one, the folks in charge of making this all come together, so your web team, and then customer support, because they're ultimately the folks that that are responsible for maintaining those relationships in the long term. So next, with that same group, you're going to determine what you're trying to achieve. And again, that's at a really macro or organization-wide level. So put another way, what must we do to continue to exist? So that could include, we have to sign new contracts. We have to get new customers. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's, we need to set up new pilot projects in order to lead to bigger business. Or maybe it's get a referral from a past customer. So in this really critical stakeholder meeting, the idea is that you're going to come away with a list of objectives. You're going to document them. And then you can solidify a plan to actually reach those goals. And that means committing to the plan, having everybody in the room commit to the plan with real deadlines and realistic staffing, so you can make sure these things all come to life. So Net, a client of ours here at KW2, helps large retailers with complex IT and connectivity challenges, like setting up point of sale kiosks at nationwide stores all on the same timeline. So they have really complex bids, they have really complex clients, and their leadership team might come up with a brand objective that is a little bit less tangible, which is listed here in navy blue. So increase warm leads for Net's sales team. So this slide gives you a preview of the measurement plan that we're going to create in the next couple steps or so. So step one is covered in that navy box. Again, that's the example of an organizational objective that stakeholder team may have come up with. So notice that it doesn't address how that objective is going to be accomplished through the website. So it doesn't mention, increase warm leads through a form. It doesn't say anything about phone calls or how that's going to happen. It just says increasing warm leads is the organizational objective. So step two will be covered next. Those are your website goals. They're outlined there in red. Below are key performance indicators and target numbers, and then you can see segments below. So we'll start to see this, all of these boxes be filled in with really useful content in the next couple steps. So Radius Bank, who we should mention is not one of our clients, most likely has an objective to increase their number of banking customers. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about increasing business banking customers for their specific needs. So these customers might start out with a checking account or a cash management service suite, and then grow into a high value loan customer. So here's the starting point for Radius Bank's measurement plan, which again, we'll be filling out over the next 3 steps. So the next step is translating these objectives into those website goals. And so for that, I'm going to hand things over to Allison.
Great, thanks, Claire. So as Claire mentioned, we are going to take those business goals that we just figured out in step 1 and translate them into website goals. So the great news is that you've already done the heavy lifting for this in your first step. Now you just need to go through your website thoroughly and find all the different ways that it helps you meet those objectives that you decided on in the first step. So it's a good idea to keep your leadership involved in this process to make sure the entire team is aligned. But at this point, the bulk of the work reviewing your site is probably going to fall to your marketing or web team. This is also, as Tim mentioned, a time to think, hey, if our website really isn't meeting our organizational objectives, are there things that we can change and improve to make sure that we have website goals that help us ladder up to those larger objectives? So to complete this step, you're going to look at your website and find all the different ways it helps you meet your goals. There should be a direct, clear line between your organizational objectives and your website goals. So if one of your goals is to increase warm leads, like it is for Net, then increasing online lead form submissions would be your corresponding website goal. Remember, as Tom mentioned, you don't want to just focus on your main conversion. Try to think about those micro conversions, all the other ways that users could express interest along the way, leading up to those major conversions. And again, if you have a goal that you can't meet, now is the time to make sure that you can bring your site closer to the ideal user experience. So for Net, as we mentioned, their goal is to generate more warm leads for their sales teams. And a lot of their business is handled through in-person meetings or presentations or bids. So the website doesn't have a direct role here for increasing new customers, but it can help them get warm leads. So we're going to make sure that we have tracking on our lead form fills on the website and make sure that they can measure that sign up there. So the second goal is a little bit less obvious, and that's that Net has a content marketing strategy. So as Claire mentioned, a lot of the time you need to convey your expertise or how you can meet customers' needs, and your website is a great communications vehicle for that. So we want to make sure that we are measuring interaction and engagement with Net's case studies and blog, because those are two key components of their content marketing strategy. So increasing engagement with that content doesn't directly influence whether or not people are going to fill out that lead form, but it does start to warm up prospects by illustrating Net's capabilities, and it also provides some nice peer proof. So we're filling out our measurement plan a little bit more. Here are 2 website goals that help Net achieve that bigger organizational goal of generating warm leads for their sales team. We've got increasing lead form fills, that kind of direct macro conversion, as well as engagement with their content that indicates a prospect is getting more interested, learning a little bit more about Net's expertise. So it's a little more straightforward with our Radius Bank example because that main conversion does take place on site. So unlike Net, you can actually buy online. And that may be the case for some of you. So they want to grow their business banking segment, and the primary way to do that is obviously increasing online applications for those business checking and loan accounts, especially those kind of introductory accounts that lead to larger business. But we can't forget that there are other smaller conversions along the way that we'll also want to track as goals, like cross-selling and upselling other services to deepen the relationship with business customers, particularly those enterprise-level customers who might buy multiple products. And generally, Radius Bank, again, not a client of ours, but they are an online-only bank. And there can be a little bit of a barrier for some businesses going strictly online for banking services. So we imagine a third goal for them is making sure that prospects are educated about the benefits of an online-only bank. So that's a softer goal, but it's something that we want to keep in mind as we're looking at goals for increasing those business banking customers, because we know that could be a barrier to our users. So we're building up our measurement strategy for Radius Bank with our 3 website goals that contribute to their overall goal of increasing business customers. Now Claire is going to take us into step 3, where we're going to identify the key performance indicators for these website goals.
Okay, so what that means is that you'll be translating what you need to get. Let's say new web form leads are your macro conversion, into the micro moments that you can track that lead up to that macro conversion. So how do you identify your KPIs? You'll need to answer the core question that's listed here. What metrics help us understand how we're doing? So that doesn't just mean measuring that final objective. For example, a new signed contract with a huge client. It also means identifying and then tracking all the actions that led up to it. Say your objective is, we'll just keep going with that one, a signed contract with a new customer. KPIs leading up to that moment could be site visits from a related ad campaign. It could be visits to a related service page, page visits to your leadership team page, maybe clicks on an individual's email address. And then that might be the end of where you can track. Or you could measure email communications occurring within your CRM, like Salesforce or HubSpot, for example. You could measure specific triggers occurring along that path, like a phone call or an in-person meeting has happened. Tracking a signed contract and then keeping track of the next project that you do with that customer. So, you know, revenue and growth of revenue over time. And that flow might sound complicated, but what I just ran through was really just a list of KPIs, both micro level and macro, from kind of the farthest away from your objective in the awareness phase, moving down that consumer purchase funnel toward the point of purchase, all the way to customer retention and then relationship management.
Yeah, and a big thing to think about in these, this is Tom again, a big thing to think about in these macro-micro conversions is oftentimes we're presenting a very, I think, ideal situation where a conversion can happen right on the website and through the website. But in a lot of B2B cases, especially in the banking world, there's third-party software that has to integrate with your website. So oftentimes what we're doing is trying to find out what is the ideal scenario and then walk it back to what's actually possible on your website. So perhaps you have a third-party software application that's actually taking all these applications or these leads, and it's not easy for you to actually get that data and sort of see it right within your website analytics package. The best way to do that is to try to figure out, well, what's the point at which they depart our website, and can we actually keep track of them when they go to this third-party application and convert? That's the greatest scenario. Sometimes those third-party software applications don't allow for that cross-domain traffic, and instead what you have to do is just measure a button click. And then you have to do a little bit of math to assume what's the conversion rate of that usual lead and what's the value of that lead. That's something that we're going to cover in the third webinar that Allison will go into detail on, but it is possible, even if you have some of these things that aren't clean bridges from one piece of your website to another piece, to actually make a strong KPI out of what you do know that's happening on your website.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really good perspective and reminder that that sometimes it's going to take a lot more, you know, technical integration, and sometimes it is just going to take that backwards math. So to get to that list of KPIs, you're going to gather probably a smaller team at this point. So you'll notice in the who column, we've taken out leadership, we've taken out subject matter experts, and really we've just honed this into the marketing and communications team, and then your web or technical team. And so, you know, you're going to review the objectives that larger set of stakeholders have created and determine which metrics are going to help you measure your progress along the way. And the outcome of this exercise is going to be a list of key performance indicators with measurable targets for each of those micro conversions, like relevant page visits, email or phone number clicks, and things like that, and micro conversions like form completions. So you can determine a good goal number for each of these micro and macro conversions in a couple of different ways. Ideally, you'll be able to look at past data and set goals for growth based on your own history. So you might not currently be tracking all of these metrics right now, and that's okay. So we encourage everybody taking part in this webinar today to go back and set up those benchmarks on your site using goals. We'll also be talking about, as Tim mentioned, our part two of this webinar series does go through a flow of naming and setting up those goals using Google Tag Manager. So if you do want to wait until May 15th, we understand that too. But one of the biggest ways you can determine these targets is to look at your own data. If you don't have past data for a specific metric, or say you're currently going through a website redesign and so you don't have apples to apples numbers to compare, one thing that you could do is you can look online or in some sort of membership organization for industry benchmarks. So a lot of times they'll have a good average for the industry as a whole. And then as a last resort, we have listed here that you can make an educated guess. And just make sure if you're doing that to adjust along the way. So once you do have those goals and events set up and tracking, make sure that you are going back and kind of refining and revising those educated guesses. Okay, so now I'll walk through some examples of KPIs that you would track for the objective that we mentioned earlier for net. And the objective here was to increase warm leads for net sales team. So one KPI that's highlighted here is page views of content within the case study section. Another might be the number of pages that users look at within that content section. So if they're looking at 3, 4, 5 pages, that could be a KPI target rather than just looking at one before they leave the site. The average time spent on each case study could be another KPI. You know, if somebody is spending 2 to 3 minutes on one of these, you can pretty much bet that they have read the whole thing. That could mean that they're getting more value out of the content than somebody who only spends 30 seconds, who you might not consider to be accomplishing one of your goals. Viewing more than one case study in a single website visit could be another KPI. And again, all those are going to be micro metrics that can help you determine how engaging your content is. It could maybe lead you to writing different types of content, or doubling down on some of your efforts that are gaining more traction. And it can tell you which case studies are the most likely to ultimately lead to a conversion. And the better you can track all of these metrics, the more likely you'll be able to adjust your marketing and web strategies for more conversions. So those are going to be things that are closer to the end result, like clicks on related technologies and services, signing up for an email newsletter to receive updates on this content, sharing a story or case studies on social media. And then you can even track things like scroll depth on an article. So 50% of the page, 75%, 80%, things like that are things that you can set up to measure how much of your content your users are actually reading. So sometimes you'll want to track how effective you are in getting your audience to the resource that they need, whether it's on your site or somewhere else. So tracking usage on a contact us button or live chat or some other engagement with a third-party tool that's integrated is a great way to see whether your users are actually invested in taking that next step. So like Tom said earlier, you're not always going to be able to track what happens in a third-party application or software. Of course, that's the ideal case, is to have this full 360 view of what your customer has done before they ever engaged with you and after. But tracking the clicks out to that software at least helps you get a closer understanding of how your users are interacting with something like chat, how often they interact. In this example, we've zoomed way in, but seeing the page that chat initiated on is another way to see what type of customer they might be. So this slide shows what a measurement plan could look like for Radius Bank or for a similar financial institution. So at the top, again in blue, is that organization's objectives. Below in red, we're starting to fill in this plan. We've got all of the website goals from step 2. And then in gold, now we can see the KPIs that ladder up to each of those tactics as they support the objective. So in your organization, you might also want to add current benchmarks to each of those gold boxes, and then target numbers to any of the KPIs that you want to track progress of over time. For the purpose of this presentation, we kept things simple, but we do really recommend, for example, that promo clicks, you're going to want to have right next to that what number you're currently getting. Maybe it's on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, and then you're going to want to put next to it what percentage increase you want to see over time based off of the increased marketing efforts that you're putting towards that tactic. So finally, Allison is going to lead us through step 4, which is identifying your audience segments.
All right, so once you do those first 3 steps, you have a pretty good measurement plan, but we don't want you to leave out this 4th step. It's really critical to add one more layer to your plan for audiences, particularly if you're an organization that's talking to a lot of different types of users. So if you're targeting different kinds of industry verticals, or if you have different folks in different roles, you might have content specific to folks in the sales organization of your customers, or folks who are more the C-suite level. So you want to make sure that you're identifying which of those website goals align with which audience. Your measurement plan really can't work hard for you if you're not also measuring who you're talking to. So this final step is about defining your audiences in your measurement plan to help you segment those important audiences or filter out your less valuable audiences based on their characteristics or website behavior. You can also complete this step with a smaller team using your existing website data, or if you have results from recent marketing efforts, that can be great input for this as well. So to define those audience segments, you're first going to decide who those most important audiences are. So what audiences are most likely to convert on your site? Or if you aren't seeing that conversion data coming through yet, who would you most like to convert? So are they small businesses? Are they larger companies? Are they a mix of business and consumers? Some organizations do both. Are they businesses in certain industry verticals or niches? So to define those audience segments, you'll want to think of the common characteristics that make up that audience. Is there a certain page on your site that they would likely visit? That's one way to identify who those audiences are based on their behavior. Would they potentially reside in a specific geographic region? Maybe you have sales regions that you correspond with and you want to create an audience segment for each of those sales regions. Can you use your current marketing efforts? Do you have audience data from those? And you know if someone comes in from a specific marketing campaign, they likely fit a specific audience profile. So there's lots of different ways to identify those audiences, and it's all based on how your business operates and what you're doing today. So the outcome of this step is going to be segments for each of your intended audiences so that you can ladder that up to each of the goals. In our next webinar, we're going to show you how to extend those segments into Google Audiences that you can actually use for your digital marketing efforts. So Google Audiences is a great tool that you can extend into Google Ads and other marketing platforms. So you can actually use that website behavior to define the audience and then use that for further marketing efforts. So for Net, we really only have one audience, and that's prospective customers. So to identify those prospective customers, we filter out the internal IP network, so we're not tracking on internal traffic, and filter out current customers based on on-site activity because Net has a login. So we can say anyone who's already logging in, probably not a prospect. So that's just one way to kind of narrow down those prospects. There's still a little bit of a margin of error there, obviously, but it's a good way to get rid of our internal traffic as well as folks we think maybe are current customers. For Radius Bank, they're actually targeting two different types of business customers. They have products for small businesses, and they also have more comprehensive offerings for larger commercial clients. So here we would use page views on both of those sections on their website to create audiences in Google Analytics for both those small businesses and commercial prospects. And just like Net, we would also use behavior like logging in to segment our current customers away from folks we think may be prospects. So that's what a completed 4-step measurement plan looks like for two different organizational goals. But in reality, yours is probably going to look a lot more like this because we focused on one organizational goal and the website goals that correspond to it, but you're going to have 3 to 5 organizational goals you're tracking on, so it's going to be a little bit more complex. So just to recap, our 4-step process for creating a measurement plan starts with your organizational goals, which are those objectives that are most important to your company. Translates those goals into website goals by determining how your website can help you meet those larger organizational goals. And you would then take those and identify all the places on your site where you can measure how close you're coming to reaching your goals, and that would be those KPIs, all those different metrics on your site, which is what you're actually going to be measuring in Google Analytics. And lastly, you'll identify which segments you want to measure to make sure your intended audiences are taking the actions that you want them to take on your website. So now we have our measurement plan, which is our foundation for making sure you get the most out of your website data. Tom's going to talk you through a few next steps on bringing your measurement plan to life and give you a little preview of what we're going to talk about in webinar 2.
Thanks, Allison. The next sort of bit of understanding is that really what we're going to be doing is kind of operationalizing this plan. This is really a strategic plan that you've walked through. You've created this framework for understanding through the 4 steps what your organizational goals are, how to break it down into actual KPIs and segments. But really when it comes down to implementing this on your website, you're talking about 2 things, goals and events. Those are the things that actually bring your plan to life. It's also what takes the analytics, which if you have Google Analytics on your site, but with no goals and events, what you have is a lot of noise at this point without a whole lot of signal. And goals and events really allow you to isolate signals that you want to pay attention to and make good decisions. I would say as a sort of chest beat to the marketers in the audience and everywhere, this is a chance for marketing, because of the uniqueness of website analytics, to really start driving data-driven decisions for the entire organization. You have the ability to start really creating a framework for understanding what kind of data is being fed to your organization on the behavior of people visiting your site. You can help drive people to make better decisions about how they want to move their organization forward by looking at data and making strong decisions. So it's a huge opportunity. It doesn't come to life though unless you start putting goals and events in place on your website. Those goals and events are loosely tied to things that we talked about earlier. Those macro conversions are really kind of where those goals are mostly isolated. Those are the things like sales leads, maybe support requests, event registrations. But the events themselves are a little bit more of those micro things, little clicks here, scrolls here, things like that. They can include macro conversions, but mostly those are micro conversions. And events are just behavior actions on the website. These are things you need to have put in place on your website to support that framework that's more abstract at this point, to really isolate individual behavior that people are going to be exhibiting on a website for you to understand. So what does that do for you? Really what that leads to is a greater degree of signal to noise. You're going to have things that are easier for you to, more insights that you can have with the data. You're going to be able to see on-site behavior and really isolate what you want to see people doing and what they're actually doing. And it'll also let you compare those conversions across a lot of different dimensions to say, you know what? Should you be doing more blogging because that helps with your organic reach? I don't know. Let's look at the data and see what's the conversion rate for the organic source of traffic to our website and the relative conversion rate for that traffic source to ones that are coming through advertising, or what's our social giving us? Really those questions can kind of live in isolation and not have any kind of data behind it until you start putting goals and events in place on your website. And you'd rather have people not talking just sort of on their own personal bias to support why they want to do something, and rather really tie it to things that are happening on the website that drive your business forward. Unless you have that data with goals and events on your website, you're probably all just arguing from a personal bias. You really want to have data be the thing that helps you make those decisions. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Tim to talk about the next webinar that we've got going on, but this is really going to be how you implement this plan with the next webinar that we have.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, so webinar number 2 is going to be specifically about creating those goals and events that Tom just talked about using Tag Manager. So again, to reiterate what Tag Manager does, it allows you to set up events without having to have a programmer do it. If you believe you think you need to have a programmer put events on your site and that's a barrier to you, the way around that is to set up Tag Manager. And then you can control, you can add them, you can delete them. You get very minute, granular control on setting up those events and being a lot more flexible with those. So that's what we're going to hone in on that second one. At the end of this webinar, an hour off after it, you guys will be receiving an email from us that'll have a link to this presentation. If this was helpful, you can go there. It's just a Google Doc. So you'll get that link. If you found this helpful, pass the sign up link on to any colleagues or anybody who you think might find it helpful. We are at 11:51. We do have some questions that have come in, so I'm just going to address a couple of those, and then we'll let you guys roll on to your lunch hour. So, first question, how often should I be checking my analytics? Claire, can you take that one maybe?
Yeah, sure. So how often you check your Google Analytics depends a lot on, the size of your daily or weekly traffic. And it also depends a lot on how many things you are changing about how you're getting people to the site, I guess would be my answer. So for sites with a ton of traffic, so say you're getting thousands of visits per day, or you're running maybe A/B tests, or you're running, larger spend or mid-spend marketing campaigns, you would ideally be checking in daily to see some changes and to see, some impacts of those marketing efforts. I would say, if you are not running paid media, and if there's nothing huge going on the marketing side, you could do kind of a weekly spot check to kind of make sure that everything is trending how it's supposed to. And then, a monthly more in-depth review is probably going to be plenty for most companies, unless you're, again, running those really large scale campaigns.
Yeah. Another reminder, for the most part, you want to use analytics to find trends. You're looking for trends over time, and that might take a long time, right? Like if you have a large purchase, something that's going to, for a B2B purchaser, $20,000, $50,000 or something, or some large purchase like that of a service or a product, that seasonality, that could take you 12 months to 18 months to even complete a sale on that. So you're using Google and analytics to try to just spot the trends over time. So you may not see enough data from a month or even a quarter, but across 6 months to a year, you might actually start to see where the valuable clicks are and what you should focus more content on. So use analytics as a trending tool. Another question that came in, where can I see my visitor characteristics within analytics? Allison, I think I'll have you take that one.
Yeah, so there is a section within analytics called audiences that will give you a lot of different characteristics of your audiences. So it'll tell you where they're coming from, what type of device they're using, whether or not they're a new or returning user. So there's a lot of good data in that audiences section where you can kind of see at a higher level where folks are coming from and some of the things that make up their kind of audience profile. Google also offers a demographics setting that you can enable within audiences that has some great data that comes actually from their own advertising data, and it doesn't give you a full look at every single user and what they are or who they are, but it'll give you things like gender, age, and even some kind of interest groups or affinity categories. So you might find that, for example, you have a lot of users who are interested in gardening, or you have a lot of folks coming from the hospitality management segment. So lots of good ways to get a little bit of extra data from folks, and we definitely recommend enabling those demographic and interest reports. That's another thing we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in our second webinar about how to just get a little bit more out of that analytics data.
Okay, great, thank you. Why don't we end it there? It's 11:55. You got 5 minutes back to your day. Hopefully you found this valuable. We'll be talking to you again on May 15th. Reach out with any questions to my email. It's up on the screen right now, and then you'll be receiving that email about an hour from now with the link to our presentation. So thanks a ton for attending. Have an awesome day. Take care.